Hi everyone, welcome to my latest video. In this we're doing something a little bit different. It's my first ever review video. So a few weeks ago, people from Mei Liang Watercolor Paints, which is a sister company of Paul Rubens, reached out and they offered to send me this 48-piece watercolor set in exchange for a review. So just being fully transparent, they did give me this set for free. I'm not being paid otherwise, but just to be transparent, that's what happened. And I'm interested in exploring this, so I figured I would give a review and take this out for a spin. And for reference, they've marketed this as a student set. Capable of doing everything from beginners, they say professionals as well. In the course of the review, I think it's quite a robust set for the price point and the amount of paints you get, but we'll get into the details. So I'm just sort of unboxing here. They gave a swatch sheet, which will be the first exercise I do after uncovering all the paints. So all of the little half pans are wrapped with these labels that give you the name of the paint, but there's nothing on the half pan that actually labels it. Thankfully, that contact sheet for the swatches is labeled, and all of the paints are in the same order that they're in the pan, so you will be able to tell which paint is which if you keep that swatch sheet. So first up is just a little bit of Zen meditation on doing all of the 48 colors. It was relatively enjoyable. Felt like unwrapping candies. And there we are. There's the 48 paints, all unwrapped. They are a bit tricky to get in and out of the pan holder. I don't think that's a huge issue, as I'm not going to be doing that very often, and it's good that they're in securely. And overall, the construction of the tin is quite good. It's about what I would expect of a metal tin. And it's right on par with the paint set that I'm currently using. There was a tiny blemish you could see in the bottom of the pan, maybe from shipping, but otherwise it's quite a robust set, I felt. And so part of this kit, it gives you a plastic container that holds the paints inside. There's two containers to it. There's the compartment with the clear case, and then there's a second compartment behind that. So it's great. They had a little bundle of 20 pages included. You can easily fit watercolor sheets if you are, like I do, drawing on the go. And so to kick things off, I'm just doing swatches, going through all the colors. The paint itself feels pretty reactive. When you get it wet with the spray, it does feel good. It feels easy to get a good mixture going. The pigment activates quite nicely, and it's easy to really get a good amount of pigment saturated. Now, I will say there were 12 metallic colors, and the way the metallics, it was really hard to get the pigment to activate, and I wasn't overly thrilled with the metallic colors, and I don't know when I would ever use them, but in the end they did turn out. They're a bit less vibrant maybe than the other pigments, but if that's something you're into, this is included in the set. And now I wanted to take it out for a spin, so everything, I have with me, the paint set, the paper, my swatches for reference, all in this portfolio. So it's getting colder, so I'm in a cafe and have a nice sunny view of Bloor Street. I go in more in depth about how I set up views and all of that in other videos, but I start, as always, picking a basic unit, going in pencil first, and then very loosely in pen or ink afterward. I do like working on a sheet as opposed to a sketchbook. I've really embraced sketchbooks, and that's what I've just done. And there's something about working on a sheet that is nice. It was a welcome change. This does seem like good watercolor paper. It's supposed to be 100% cotton. It's a little lighter than what I usually work with. But in the end, I think I was able to get some good results with it. You'll see later in the video, I test on this paper as well as the 300 weight Arches paper that I really like, just because I think the paints are more substantial, or the bigger piece of this kit than the paper. So I really want this video to be about the paints, not so much the paper that's included with it. It is nice too having the portfolio case to draw on top of. Everything's very stable. This is actually one of the better camera setups I've had. I had a high shelf for the coffee, and I was able to put my tripod up on it, and then below on my lap I have this portfolio case. So there I got my pens down. It's a bit of a fun composition with cars are the main subjects. There's a few people walking by. And I try to set up my compositions so that I have warm and cold areas. So the van in the foreground and those street lights are sort of the cool areas, as well as the shadow side of the buildings. So I'm starting with a very saturated sky, one of the rich blues, one of the many rich blues that are included in this set. And so I'm putting a lot of water on because I like to have the paints react and see how the paint reacts to a lot of water. And then I do like to push in as much pigment on a drier brush into a wet page just to see how it reacts. And you can see there's some good, I'm no expert in watercolor by any means. I'm just sort of using this paint as I use the other paints I do. So it seems reasonable the way the paint reacts. It's giving some interesting textures. And so just giving cool tones to the areas that are in shadow. There's some alcoves in the building, and then that truck and those signs were in shadow. Yeah, and it was a very sunny morning today, or the day that I was sketching. So giving a nice warm base tone to everything. And now I'm playing around with some of the red tones. There's a lot of reds in this set as well. So just layering that over the warm base layer. I will say the paint does seem to dry very quickly, and I don't know if it's the paper. I mean, you can see the sky is still dripping, but in general, and maybe I just didn't wet the page enough, it does dry quite quickly. And now I'm just pushing in some of the deeper shadows, trying to make the sketch a bit more dynamic. I didn't share the process, but you can see I've added some line work as well. Now, I didn't slow down for these trees. My favorite color to work with is yellow ochre. And this was pretty a good rich ochre, but it's not as vibrant as the professional grade paints that I also use. So I found these paints very good, and I didn't really notice much difference between them and the professional set that I do use, except for the yellow ochre. That was one exception that I did see as different. So that was the live demo or going out and sketching on location, which I like to do. I'm going to give a bit of a detail just on how the paint looks when you work with it. So this is me getting a nice yellow together, lots of water, lots of pigment. And I do that with all primary colors. And I'm just testing some big swatches on. I do two demos. This is the paper that comes with the set, the cotton watercolor paper, and then I do on a heavier weight cotton watercolor paper. And you can see the red is really rich. It behaves pretty nicely when the page is wet and I'm trying to add just a very, very saturated and drier brush. And I just like seeing how pigment reacts. So you can see I've got a very wet page and I'm just pushing pigment into it, seeing how they react. So for something that's marketed as a student beginner set, I was very impressed. I have another student set or beginner set from a well-known brand, and they don't behave as well as these pigments. And so then you can see I went just directly to the pan for that yellow to try to get as much pigment into the wet page. And a little bit of mixing the paints on the pan, the yellow and the rich blue. Now just because of the ratios I used, it was a relatively pale green, so I'm pushing some yellow and some blue over top of that pale green. And then I've wet the page and just putting stripes of pigment into it. And you can see it's quite reactive. It flows out nicely, or I think it flows out nicely. I'm not sure how entirely aware of correct watercolor technique. So if somebody's an expert, please comment. And I'm doing this so that you can make your own judgments too about this paint set. If there's something that it's doing that I'm not educated about, please comment, let people know. But I was pretty impressed. Okay, so I did want to do another test with showing the Arches paper 300 weight. It's definitely a heavier paper. I wanted to see how these paints react to that paper, which is what I'm more used to. So again, mixing a lot of pigment, a lot of water on the palette. And so this is dry paper, wet brush, a lot of pigments. And then wet brush, no new pigment, just to see how it flows on the page. And then pushing in just raw pigment. I should say that the professional set that I use for my sketches, pushing in pigment like that there is a little bit more vibrancy, I want to say, but still very comparable. And this was a wet circle and pushing in pigments. Doing the same thing now with a very bright yellow. I do like this yellow. And then flicking in some blues. And so this is a stronger green that I mixed using again, I'm just using primary colors for these tests. So that was mixed in the pan. And I'm going to push in some more blue. And this one half dry, half wet page. And you can see it connects to the green and the pigment slowly just spreading over the wet page. So overall, for a beginner or student level watercolor set, I thought these paints were quite good. I like the way they behave on the page and mixing with each other. If you're interested, the product links are in the description below. There's a sale on the gray for a limited time. You can get 15% off. If you like the blue box, apparently there's only 4 left in Canada and the US. So thank you so much for tuning in.